Okay, guys. So I was at a training recently and a discussion about lights came up. Specifically, um, pressure pads or switches versus just the push button on the back of the light. Now, personal experience, I have had pressure switches, okay, fail on me at some really important times. Um, so I personally run just my light with the button on the back. That's how I run it. Okay. Now, if you're going to run something like a pressure pad or a switch, okay, um, you, you need to be able to access, or you need a redundancy, right? So you shouldn't just rely on the switch itself. For instance, this is a tail cap to a Surefire Scout light, okay, one of mine. All right. And this is a Unity Axon button. So this will plug into the back of this cap. And now the only thing I have to access my light is now this Axon switch. Okay. Now, Unity has fixed that with the invention of their gas cap. Okay. So you do have that option. If you want to run the Surefire Scout, you can get that set up. But you need to, just as a safeguard, to access your light in case of a switch failure, we need to be able to get to that button. That way we still have the ability to use our light. Okay, like the stream light. So for instance, the stream light tail cap, and this is a big stream light. This thing is ridiculous. This is the ProTac 2.0. It's like 2,000 lumens. This thing's crazy. So this, you can see it's got the port for the pressure pad and the button. Okay. So the pressure pad connects into it like this, and I'm able to access the light via the pressure pad, or in case this pad fails, okay, I have the tail cap access button also. The other thing that you need to consider is you need to be able to not only have a momentary, right? If we're talking about switches here, and I believe most of them do at this point, right? There's not a whole lot of them out there that are just momentary, but you need the ability to have constant on. Okay, so just some things to consider. All right. Um, Another thing when it comes to lights, for me specifically, okay, my light, I use it as a point of reference. So I communicate with this thing, okay? Uh, and then it's also a reference of my point of aim. So the closer that I can get this light in line with the muzzle, the better, right? Now, this one's slightly offset. Okay, so things to consider there is now the mechanical offset. So not only do I have mechanical offset from the sight to my barrel, now I have it from my light to the barrel, right? Which in this case, there's a vertical difference. And now this is kind of like a horizontal vertical. We'll call it a vertical. This is a vertical difference. Uh, um, and I use this especially if I'm shooting from, say, like retention. This is a point of reference for me as to where my shots are going to be placed. Okay, so again, the closer I can get that in line with my muzzle, the better. Kind of like this setup here on this rifle. Okay, you can see that this one is directly in line, with my muzzle, or almost directly in line. There's like a slight offset. Okay, so now pretty much the only offset I have to worry about is the mechanical. Now, obviously, when I turn this into a retention position, the offset is now, on its side. It's adjacent to where the light's at, as opposed to being vertical, right? But that allows me to reference my light where it is and where my shots are going to be placed in the event that I make contact with somebody in a close quarter encounter. I can use that light as a point of reference before I get onto target and into my sights. And like the third and the last thing that came up was when utilizing lights inside of a structure, the use of momentary versus constant on, right? Um, there's a preference. There's some times where I'll use momentary lighting. There's sometimes where I'll use constant on. It just, the situation kind of dictates the response. Okay. And then there's also the question of, like, do you even need a weapon mounted light? It just kind of depends. Like, if you're Joe Blow average citizen, and you're not like clearing structures or hunting down bad guys, like you don't spend a whole lot of time in low light situations, you may find that you don't need weapon mounted light. I can tell you right now, like in my house at nighttime, outside of my bedroom, there's not a whole lot of use for a weapon mounted light. Like when I go to bed, I don't shut off all the lights, so it's not pitch black in my house. So I have weapon mounted lights on all of my rifles, and most of my pistols, just in case I need them. But I wouldn't say, like, inside of my residence specifically, that they're a necessity. And one final thing to consider when it comes to lights: lights are not only good for illuminating spaces and finding people, they're also good at blinding people. So let me know what you think down in the comments. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and go train.